I never considered myself the paranoid type. Emma and I had been married for 6 years, and in that time, I'd always trusted her implicitly. Ours wasn't a perfect marriage. We bickered like any other couple, but I never doubted her loyalty. So when I first noticed the security cameras glitching out in the afternoons, I didn't think much of it. Probably a software update, I mumbled to myself, sipping my coffee as I scrolled through the footage on my phone. The cameras would shut off for about an hour each day, then flick back on without any prompts from me. I reset the system a few times, hoping to fix whatever bug was causing it. But the issue persisted. "Hey, babe, have you noticed the cameras acting up?" I asked Emma one evening as she folded laundry in the living room. She didn't even look up. "No, haven't noticed. Maybe we should call the company or something," she replied casually, shrugging. Her tone was so nonchalant that I almost let it go, but something about the way she said it lingered in the back of my mind. It wasn't that she seemed guilty, it was the opposite. Too dismissive. The next day, the same thing happened. I got an alert that the cameras were offline around 2:30 p.m., then they popped back on at 3:45. This time, I opened the app to see if I could find a specific reason. Nothing. No error messages, no warnings, just a suspicious gap in the timeline. I decided to test the system, waving my hand in front of the camera at exactly 2:20. Sure enough, it caught me. 10 minutes later, though, the feed went black. I stood there, staring at my phone, a pit forming in my stomach. Something wasn't right. That evening, I brought it up again. "Emma, it's weird how the cameras keep going offline. It's always at the same time. Do you think someone might be messing with them?" She laughed, a little too hard. "Ryan, you're being ridiculous. What, do you think we've got some high-tech hacker breaking into our system just to mess with us?" "No, but it's strange, don't you think?" I pressed. She waved me off, her smile tight. "You worry too much. If it bothers you that much, call the company." I nodded but didn't say anything. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, running the situation through my head. Could it really be just a glitch? Or was there something else going on? Emma's reaction had been too dismissive, almost like she didn't want me to dig any deeper. The next morning, I had a plan. While Emma was out running errands, I installed 2 backup cameras, one in the living room, hidden in the bookshelf, and another near the front entrance, tucked behind a decorative plant. They weren't part of the main system, which meant they wouldn't be affected if the primary cameras went offline. I didn't tell Emma. It felt weird, almost invasive, setting them up, but something about the situation gnawed at me. If it was nothing, I'd apologize for my paranoia and take them down. If it wasn't, well, I needed to know. For the next 2 days, I checked the feeds obsessively. The same pattern continued. The main cameras would go offline mid-afternoon. But now, with the backup cameras rolling, I finally had a chance to see what was happening during those blackouts. On the 3rd day, as I sat in my car during lunch break, I pulled up the feed from the living room. My heart raced as I scrubbed through the footage. At first, everything looked normal. Then, around 2:30 p.m., Emma appeared in the frame, heading toward the main security panel. She hesitated for a moment, glanced around, and then reached up to disable the cameras. My breath hitched. Why would she do that? I rewound the footage and watched again, my stomach tightening with each second. Emma wasn't a tech wizard. She rarely touched the security system, claiming it was too complicated. But here she was, deliberately shutting it off. The pit in my stomach grew heavier. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her actions didn't sit right with me. Something was going on, and I was going to find out what. That evening, I acted normal. I didn't mention the cameras or what I'd seen. Instead, I asked about her day, listened to her talk about work, and even laughed at one of her corny jokes. But inside, I was boiling with questions. Why would she disable the cameras? What was she hiding? And, most importantly, how long had this been going on? I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face on the screen, sneaking toward the panel like she didn't want anyone to see. Whatever she was doing, she didn't want me to know about it. Tomorrow, I'd check the backup footage again. If I was wrong, I'd feel like an idiot. But if I was right, I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might find. I woke up the next morning with a mix of dread and determination. Part of me hoped that the footage would show nothing, that Emma was just being cautious for some benign reason. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me and didn't want me to catch wind of it. But deep down, I knew I was grasping at straws. During my lunch break, I found a quiet corner at a nearby park and pulled out my phone. With a deep breath, I accessed the backup camera feed from the previous afternoon. The video started normally, our empty living room bathed in afternoon sunlight. Then, at precisely 2:35 p.m., the front door opened. Liam walked in. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Liam was one of our mutual friends, someone I'd known since college. We'd watched countless games together, shared beers and laughs. Seeing him step into my home when I wasn't there felt like a punch to the gut. I watched as Emma appeared from the hallway, a smile spreading across her face. Not the casual smile she gave acquaintances, but a warm, inviting grin. She hugged him, longer than a friendly embrace, and they stood there for a moment, holding each other. I could feel my pulse in my ears, a roaring sound that drowned out the ambient noise around me. I forced myself to keep watching. They moved to the living room, sitting close on the couch. Their conversation was muted, no audio, but their body language spoke volumes. Emma playfully swatted his arm, laughing at something he said. Liam brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Then, she leaned in and kissed him. I looked away, the image burning into my mind. This couldn't be real. Not Emma, not Liam. But when I glanced back at the screen, they were still there, entwined in a moment that shattered my world. They broke apart and Emma stood up, taking his hand and leading him down the hallway toward our bedroom. I paused the video, unable to watch any further. The betrayal was like a physical weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I sat there for a long time, staring blankly at the paused frame. Questions swirled in my mind. How long had this been going on? Why Liam? What did I do to deserve this? The park around me faded into the background as I grappled with the reality of what I'd just witnessed. People walked by, dogs barked in the distance, but I was numb to it all. Eventually, I forced myself to watch the rest of the footage. They emerged from the bedroom about an hour later, looking disheveled but carefree. Emma walked him to the door, gave him another lingering kiss, and then he was gone. She re-enabled the main security cameras moments later, her expression returning to the casual indifference she'd shown me the night before. I felt a surge of anger mixed with profound hurt. This wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It was deliberate, calculated. She was using our home, our sanctuary, to carry on an affair with one of my closest friends. I needed to confront this, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. Bursting in with accusations might just lead to more lies or denials. I needed more evidence, something undeniable. That evening, I tried to act normal, but it was harder than before. Every time I looked at Emma, I saw her with Liam. She chatted about her day as if nothing had happened, and I responded with monosyllabic answers, afraid that if I said more, my voice would betray me. "Are you okay?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You seem quiet tonight." "Just a long day at work," I replied, forcing a tight smile. "Thinking about a big project coming up." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. "Well, don't stress too much. It'll work out." I wanted to laugh at the irony but held it in. "Yeah, hopefully." That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up, formulating a plan. I needed to gather more proof, not just for myself, but so there could be no denying it when the time came to confront her. I decided to set up additional audio recorders around the house, particularly in the living room and bedroom. If they were talking, I wanted to hear what they were saying. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. The main cameras would go offline in the afternoon, and Liam would show up not long after. I didn't bother watching the video feed immediately. Instead, I waited until I could review everything at once. When I finally sat down to go through the latest recordings, I braced myself. The video confirmed what I already knew, but it was the audio that cut me deepest. "He has no idea," Emma's voice floated through the speaker, a hint of smugness in her tone. "Are you sure he's not catching on?" Liam asked. "Ryan? Please. He's too busy with work to notice anything. And even if he did, he'd probably blame the cameras again," she said with a laugh. My grip tightened on the phone as their conversation continued. "You're really okay with this?" Liam pressed. "Why wouldn't I be? I'm getting what I want, and he remains blissfully ignorant." "It's a win-win," she replied. Their casual dismissal of me, as if I were some oblivious fool, ignited a fire inside. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the blatant disrespect, the mockery. I knew then that I couldn't confront Emma without a solid plan. She was already adept at hiding things and manipulating situations. If I wanted the truth to come out, I'd have to be strategic. I decided to start with Liam. Maybe facing him directly would yield some answers, or at least shake things up. He owed me that much, if there was any shred of decency left in him. But more than that, I needed to regain control. This was my life they were playing with, and I wasn't going to sit back and let it crumble without a fight. By the time I got home that night, I'd decided on my next move. Confronting Liam without more leverage felt like jumping into the deep end without a life jacket. I needed more than just footage of him sneaking into my house. I needed to hear them, hear what they were saying about me. I had a gut feeling their words would be the nail in the coffin, something even Emma couldn't lie her way out of. The next morning, I left early for work, acting as if it was just another normal day. But before leaving, I carefully placed small audio recorders in key locations around the house, hidden in the living room bookshelf, another in the bedroom, and one near the entryway. These weren't visible like cameras. They were tiny and virtually undetectable, perfect for catching conversations without anyone being the wiser. When the afternoon rolled around, I couldn't focus on anything else. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for the moment the main cameras would cut out. Like clockwork, they went offline at 2:32 p.m. I didn't bother looking at the backup video this time. I already knew what was happening. Instead, I forced myself to wait until I could review the audio that evening. By the time I got home, my anger had turned into something colder. I walked in the door, smiled at Emma, and kissed her cheek, all while my stomach churned with what I might hear. She acted like nothing was wrong, cheerfully asking about my day and what I wanted for dinner. I wanted to scream, but instead, I played along. "Let's just order pizza," I said with a shrug, keeping my tone light. "I'm too wiped to cook." She nodded and pulled out her phone to place the order. Watching her act so casual, like everything was perfectly fine, made my skin crawl. Once she left the room, I retrieved the audio recorders and slipped them into my bag. Later that night, after Emma went to bed, I sat in the garage with my laptop and headphones. The first audio file started with faint shuffling noises, the sound of someone moving through the living room. I fast-forwarded until I heard voices. Emma's laugh was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't her usual laugh, either. It was softer, flirtier. I clenched my fists as Liam's voice came through next. "You really think he doesn't suspect anything?" he asked. "Ryan?" Emma said, her tone dripping with derision. "He's so clueless, it's almost cute. Honestly, I think he'd apologize to me if he caught us. He'd probably think it was his fault." They both burst out laughing, their mockery echoing in my ears like a taunt. I felt my jaw tighten, and my hands curled into fists so tight they ached. But I couldn't stop listening. "You're sure he's not catching on?" Liam pressed, his tone more cautious than hers. "Not a chance," Emma said, confidence laced in her voice. "I've got him wrapped around my finger. He'd believe anything I told him." "Must be nice," Liam said, chuckling. "So, when are you going to tell him about us?" "Tell him? Please. Why would I ruin a good thing? I've got the best of both worlds, his paycheck and you," she said with a laugh. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Hearing Emma reduce our marriage, our life together, to nothing more than convenience was like a dagger to the chest. The person I thought I knew was a stranger. But it wasn't just the betrayal that fueled my rage. It was the way she spoke about me, the way she mocked me so casually. It wasn't enough for her to cheat. She had to belittle me, too. I sat in the garage for hours, replaying the audio, cataloging every word they said. By the time I finished, my anger had crystallized into a resolve I hadn't felt before. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I wanted to see her squirm. I wanted her to realize she wasn't as untouchable as she thought. The next day, I made a decision. Liam would be my first target. I needed to see how he'd react when faced with the truth. Would he own up to what he'd done, or would he try to weasel his way out of it? Either way, it would give me the ammunition I needed to tighten the noose around both of them. The next morning, I woke up with one thing on my mind. Liam. If anyone was going to crack first, it would be him. Emma was too good at hiding her lies, but Liam? He wasn't as sharp. He always folded under pressure in the past, and I was banking on that now. I texted him casually, keeping it light. Hey man, it's been a while. Let's grab a drink and catch up. You free tonight? It didn't take long for him to respond. Liam, sure, sounds good. How about Sullivan's at 7? I stared at the message, imagining the smug grin on his face. Did he really think I didn't know? That I was just another clueless husband? Fine. Let him think that for now. It made the game more interesting. By the time I arrived at Sullivan's, my blood was boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. The place was dimly lit, with the usual crowd of after-work drinkers. Liam was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a beer in hand. He waved me over, all smiles. Ryan, good to see you, man, he said, standing to give me a quick handshake. Yeah, it's been a minute, I replied, sliding into the booth across from him. My voice was steady, my face neutral. I couldn't let him see the storm brewing underneath. We ordered another round of drinks and made small talk for a while. Sports, work, the usual bullshit. But the longer we talked, the more I noticed his subtle nervous habits. He kept glancing at his phone, tapping his fingers on the table, avoiding eye contact. He didn't know what was coming, but something in him could sense it. Finally, I leaned back and took a long sip of my beer. So, Liam, I began, my tone casual. You've been spending a lot of time with Emma lately. His head snapped up, his expression flickering between confusion and panic. What do you mean? I shrugged, keeping my gaze locked on his. I've noticed you've been around the house a lot. You know, while I'm at work. His mouth opened, then closed. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out shaky. I don't know what you're talking about, man. I've barely seen Emma. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, placing it on the table. Funny, because I've got footage that says otherwise. The color drained from his face. He stared at the phone like it was a ticking time bomb. What footage? He stammered. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I played a short clip, just enough to show him sneaking into my house and kissing Emma in the living room. His eyes widened, and he ran a hand through his hair, muttering a curse under his breath. Ryan, listen, I can explain, he started. Explain what? I interrupted, my voice cold. That you've been screwing my wife? That you've been sneaking around behind my back like a coward? Man, it wasn't like that, he said, his voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. You didn't mean for it to happen? That's the best you've got? You've been coming into my house, disrespecting me, and now you want to play the victim? He tried to backtrack, his hands raised defensively. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I swear, I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, my voice rising. You've been laughing at me behind my back. Do you think I don't know what you've been saying? I've got audio, Liam. I've heard it all. That shut him up. He sank back in his seat, his face pale. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at the table like a scolded child. Then, finally, he spoke. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I smirked, the satisfaction of watching him squirm dulling some of my anger. Oh, don't worry about that. I've got plans. But first, you're going to stay the hell away from my house, my wife, and my life. Got it? He nodded quickly, like a bobblehead. Yeah, I got it. I stood up, grabbing my phone. Good. Because if I catch you anywhere near Emma again, I won't just ruin your reputation. I'll ruin your life. Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the bar, leaving him to stew in his guilt. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Confronting Liam was just the beginning. Now, it was Emma's turn. Confronting Liam gave me a sense of grim satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. He was just half the problem. The other half, Emma, was still at home, blissfully unaware that her little web of lies was starting to unravel. I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed, though. I needed to catch her in the act. Something so undeniable that not even her well-practiced excuses could wriggle out of it. That night, I lay in bed next to her, my mind racing with ideas. She was sound asleep, her breathing even and calm, while my blood boiled. I stared at the ceiling, piecing together a plan. I wouldn't just confront her, I'd corner her. I wanted her to feel the same suffocating helplessness I felt when I saw her and Liam on the footage. The next morning, I made my move. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned a work trip. "Hey, Emma, just a heads up, I've got to head out of town tomorrow for a meeting. It's an all-day thing, so I won't be back until late." She looked up from her coffee, her face neutral but her eyes flickering with something. Relief? Excitement? It was subtle, but I caught it. "Oh, okay," she said, her tone light. "Do you need me to pack you anything?" "Nah, it's just a quick trip. I'll probably grab something on the road." She nodded, and that was it. No questions, no concern about me being gone all day. It was almost too easy. The next day, I left the house early, making sure to kiss her goodbye like everything was normal. I even packed an overnight bag to sell the lie. Instead of heading to work, though, I parked a few blocks away and waited. My hidden cameras were already rolling, and I wanted to give her plenty of time to believe I was gone. Around noon, I pulled up the live feed from the living room camera. Sure enough, at 12:45, she walked into the frame. She was dressed casually, but she'd taken the time to put on makeup, something she didn't usually bother with unless we were going out. I watched as she moved to the front door, checking her phone. A few minutes later, Liam walked in. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as I watched them hug, their bodies pressed close together. It wasn't just a friendly embrace. They stood there for a moment, holding each other, before Emma took his hand and led him toward the living room. I didn't need to see the rest. I knew where this was headed, and I was done playing the silent observer. I gave them about half an hour before heading back to the house. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway, adrenaline surging through my veins. I parked quietly, slipping in through the side entrance with the spare key. My phone was in my pocket, already recording audio and video. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside. I moved through the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the carpet, until I reached the living room. The faint sound of laughter drifted from the bedroom, and my blood boiled. They weren't even trying to be discreet. Taking a deep breath, I stormed down the hall and threw the bedroom door open. The sight before me was both expected and infuriating. Emma and Liam were tangled up in the sheets, their shocked faces snapping toward me as the door slammed against the wall. "What the hell, Ryan?" Emma shrieked, scrambling to pull the blanket over herself. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same damn thing," I snapped, my voice cold and steady, "but I don't think I need an explanation. The cameras already told me everything." Liam stammered, grabbing his clothes off the floor. "Man, it's not what it looks like." "Don't even try," I interrupted, stepping into the room. "You're a coward, Liam. I warned you to stay away, and you couldn't even manage that." Emma, ever the actress, switched tactics. "Ryan, listen, I can explain." "Explain?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You've been lying to my face for weeks. Don't insult me by pretending there's anything to explain." Her expression shifted from fear to anger. "Well, maybe if you weren't so obsessed with work all the time, I wouldn't have to find attention elsewhere." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "You're really going to try to blame this on me? You brought him into our house, into our bed, and now it's my fault." She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could speak, I pulled out my phone and hit play. The recording of her mocking me with Liam filled the room, every cruel word echoing like a slap. Her face went pale. You recorded us?" she whispered. "Damn right I did," I said, stepping closer. "You've been treating me like a fool, but I'm not the one sneaking around and lying." Liam grabbed his shoes, his face red. "I think I should go." "You're not going anywhere," I snapped, blocking the doorway. "Mark's on his way over. I think he'll want to hear about what his brother's been up to." Emma's eyes widened. "Ryan, don't what?" I cut her off. Don't expose you for the lying, selfish person you are? Too late. Mark arrived 10 minutes later, and the confrontation that followed was nothing short of explosive. Emma and Liam tried to deny, deflect, and justify, but the evidence spoke for itself. By the time Mark left, his relationship with Liam was as shattered as my marriage. I wasn't done yet, though. Public exposure was next on the list. Mark left furious, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Liam had gone pale, muttering half-hearted apologies before darting out of the house like a scared dog. That left me and Emma alone, the tension thick enough to choke on. She was perched on the edge of the bed, her arms crossed, wearing a mix of defiance and panic on her face. "Ryan, can we just talk about this?" she started, her voice shaky but still trying to hold some control. "Talk?" I spat the word out like it burned. "You mean like you and Liam talked? About how clueless I am? About how you've been using me?" Her face contorted, a mix of anger and shame. "I didn't use you. I— Stop lying," I roared, cutting her off. "I've got it all, Emma. The cameras, the audio, the text you thought I wouldn't find. Every single thing. So, spare me whatever excuse you're about to pull out of thin air." For the first time, she seemed to falter. Her shoulders sagged, and her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for an escape. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she finally muttered, her voice small. "Oh? How was it supposed to be, Emma? Because from where I'm standing, you've done everything to destroy this marriage." She looked at me then, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is all my fault? You've been checked out for months, Ryan. Always at work, always on your phone. Do you know how lonely I've been?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Lonely? That's the best you've got? I was working to keep this house, this life, together. And you repay me by screwing one of my closest friends in our bed?" She flinched but didn't back down. "I needed someone who actually paid attention to me. Someone like Liam," I said, my tone icy. "You know, your attention-seeking is one thing, but dragging him into this? Mocking me with him? That's a whole new level of disgusting." Her face hardened, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she stood up, squaring her shoulders. "Fine. I screwed up. I get it. But I'm not the only one who failed in this marriage, Ryan. You've got plenty of blame here, too." I stared at her, my anger boiling over. "Blame? The only thing I'm blaming myself for is trusting you." Her defiance cracked at that, and she sank back onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. "What do you want me to say, Ryan? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Fine. I'm sorry. I regret it. But I can't undo it." The room fell silent, her words hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the person sitting in front of me. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "You're right, Emma. You can't undo it. But you can face the consequences." She looked up, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and opened my social media app. "This," I said, holding up the screen. "You wanted to play games, Emma. Now the world gets to see the truth." Her eyes widened in panic. "Ryan, no. You can't do that. Please. Watch me," I said, my voice like steel. I uploaded the videos, the texts, the audio, all of it. In minutes, it was live for everyone to see. Mutual friends, family, co-workers, they'd all know what she'd done. Emma lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone. "Ryan, stop. You're being insane." I stepped back, holding the phone out of her reach. "Insane? No, Emma. Insane is thinking you could do this and get away with it." The notifications started rolling in almost immediately. Comments, messages, reactions. It was a tidal wave of public humiliation, and she could do nothing to stop it. Over the next few hours, the fallout began. My phone buzzed nonstop as friends and acquaintances reacted to the posts. Some were shocked, others furious. Emma's name was dragged through the mud, and Liam didn't escape unscathed either. Mark called me again, his voice seething as he vowed to cut Liam out of his life for good. Emma spent most of the evening locked in the bedroom, her phone clutched in her hands as she tried to do damage control. But there was no salvaging this. The truth was out, and it wasn't going away. I sat in the living room, staring at the chaos I'd unleashed. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. Emma thought she could manipulate me, lie to me, humiliate me. But now the tables had turned. By morning, the fallout had reached a fever pitch. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, texts, calls, social media messages. The evidence I'd posted had gone viral within our circle, spilling out into the wider community. People were furious, disgusted, and some just plain curious about the details of Emma and Liam's betrayal. When I walked into the kitchen that morning, Emma was already there, clutching her phone with trembling hands. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from a sleepless night. She looked up at me, her face a mix of rage and desperation. "Ryan, what the hell have you done?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Everyone is texting me. My mom called me in tears. Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "What I've done to you? Are you serious right now? I didn't do anything to you, Emma. You did this to yourself." "You've ruined me," she yelled, slamming her phone down on the counter. "People at work are calling. My friends are cutting me off. Do you even care about what this is doing to me?" I shrugged, keeping my tone cold. "Not really. Maybe you should have thought about that before you started sneaking Liam into my house and mocking me behind my back." Her voice dropped, trembling with anger. This is cruel, Ryan. You didn't just expose me. You humiliated me." I stepped closer, towering over her. "And how many times did you humiliate me, Emma? How many times did you lie to my face and treat me like a fool? Don't expect me to feel sorry for you now." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say. By midday, I started receiving calls from friends and family. Most of them were supportive, expressing shock and anger at Emma and Liam's betrayal. A few tried to play the peacemaker, suggesting that maybe I'd gone too far by posting everything online. "Ryan, my sister Rachel, said over the phone, I get why you're upset. But don't you think this could have been handled privately?" "Privately?" I scoffed. Emma didn't care about privacy when she was screwing Liam in my bed. I'm done protecting her. Rachel sighed, but she didn't argue. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. You don't deserve this, and I'm here for whatever you need." "Thanks," I said, the weight of the conversation lifting slightly. "I appreciate it." The ripple effect of the exposure was far-reaching. Mutual friends began to distance themselves from Emma and Liam, some outright condemning them in the comments section of my post. One of Emma's closest friends, Megan, even reached out to apologize. "Ryan, I had no idea this was happening," Megan said over text. "If I'd known, I would have told you. I'm so sorry." The real bombshell came later that evening. Liam's brother, Mark, called me, his voice tense with fury. "Ryan, I just wanted to let you know I've cut Liam off," he said. "What he did to you, to us, it's unforgivable. I've talked to our parents, and they're just as disgusted. He's going to regret this for the rest of his life." "That means a lot, Mark," I replied. "I didn't expect you to take my side, but I'm glad you did." "He crossed a line," Mark said firmly. "And as far as I'm concerned, he's no brother of mine anymore." Emma, meanwhile, spent the rest of the day spiraling. She alternated between begging me to take the posts down and screaming at me for destroying her reputation. By the evening, she had retreated to the bedroom, refusing to come out. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. This was the bed she'd made, and now she had to lie in it, alone. As for Liam, word spread quickly through his social circles. His workplace found out about the affair, and from what Mark told me, his reputation there was in shambles. A few mutual acquaintances even reached out to let me know that Liam had been kicked out of the weekly poker group we used to attend together. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch, scrolling through the aftermath online. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The truth was out, and the people who had wronged me were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But there was still one thing left to do. I couldn't live under the same roof as Emma anymore. Tomorrow, I'd file for divorce and start the process of cutting her out of my life for good. The morning after the storm of exposure, the house felt eerily quiet. Emma hadn't come out of the bedroom since the previous night, and honestly, I preferred it that way. I didn't have the energy for another screaming match or her endless cycle of excuses and blame shifting. Instead, I spent the morning packing up a few essentials. It was clear to me now that staying here, in this house with her, wasn't an option. This place was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and I was done fighting. Later that day, I met with a divorce attorney. Sitting in the office, laying out everything that had happened, felt surreal. The attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Denise, listened intently, her expression unreadable. "So, you have evidence of the affair?" she asked, jotting down notes. "Plenty," I replied. "Videos, audio recordings, texts, everything." She nodded approvingly. "Good. That will make things much easier. Adultery is grounds for divorce, and with this level of proof, we can ensure you come out on top in the settlement." I felt a small glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "What about the house?" I asked. "I don't want it anymore, but I also don't want her to keep it." Denise looked thoughtful. "If she can't afford to buy you out, we can push for it to be sold. You'll split the proceeds, but given the circumstances, we might be able to argue for a larger share in your favor." That was all I needed to hear. I signed the necessary paperwork and left the office with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about ending the marriage anymore. It was about taking back control of my life. By the time I got home, Emma was sitting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes red from crying. "Ryan," she said, her voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I stopped in the doorway, crossing my arms. "Talk? What could you possibly have to say now?" She flinched at my tone but pressed on. I've been thinking about everything, and I just want to say I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I hate myself for it. I was selfish, and I let things get out of control. But I don't want to lose you. I want to fix this." I stared at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Fix this?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You think an apology is enough to fix what you've done? You didn't just cheat on me, Emma. You mocked me, lied to me, and brought another man into our home, into our bed. There's no fixing that." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. Her regret, if it was even genuine, came far too late. "I've already filed for divorce," I added, watching as the words hit her like a physical blow. "You'll hear from my attorney soon." She broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. But I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, leaving her to face the ruins of her actions. In the days that followed, the fallout continued to spread. Mutual friends who hadn't already distanced themselves from Emma began reaching out to me, expressing their support and condemning her behavior. Even some of her own family members, including her mother, called to apologize on her behalf. "I don't know what she was thinking, Ryan," her mom said during one particularly emotional call. "You didn't deserve this." "No, I didn't," I replied simply. There wasn't much else to say. As for Liam, his life was unraveling just as quickly. Word got out about the affair at his workplace, and he was reportedly under investigation for violating company policies. Mark had completely cut ties with him, and their parents were livid. According to one mutual friend, Liam had been forced to move out of his apartment and was crashing on a coworker's couch. Good, I thought. Let him feel what it's like to lose everything. One night, I sat down with Rachel and a few close friends to talk about everything that had happened. It felt strange, opening up about something so personal, but their support was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. "Ryan, you're doing the right thing," Rachel said firmly. "Walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself." "Yeah," one of my friends chimed in. "And honestly, screw both of them. You deserve so much better." I nodded, the weight on my chest feeling just a little lighter. "Thanks, guys. I appreciate it." In the weeks that followed, I began taking steps to rebuild my life. I put the house on the market, with Emma reluctantly agreeing to the sale. I started seeing a therapist to work through the anger and betrayal, and though the sessions were tough, they helped me process everything. The divorce proceedings were smooth, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had. Emma didn't have a leg to stand on, and Denise made sure I came out with a favorable settlement. By the time it was finalized, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. But the best part? Seeing Emma and Liam's lives fall apart while mine slowly started to come back together. They had burned the bridge, and now they were drowning in the consequences. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.